Congratulations on receiving this richly deserved award. Each of you and your organizations played a critical role in the rapid development of COVID vaccines, as we've heard. What, in your views, are the most important insights to be gained from reflecting back on this experience? Dr. Hoge, I'd like to start with you.
I'd like to start maybe a little bit back, long before we knew about SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19, and talk about the investments in basic science and basic technology development that made it possible to respond as fast as we did in this case. The basic science work, actually, Dr. Graham's team at the Vaccine Research Center at NIH really pioneered that. You looking back decades, discovering novel antigens, novel ways of making antigens, so that if you ever needed to develop a vaccine against a virus, like a coronavirus, how would you make it most effective? And that work really underpins our vaccines and almost all the vaccines that have been developed. But in industry, those investments were happening as well, and that's where Moderna came in as a company. Our investments over the last decade, several $billions, to create new ways of making vaccines based on our technology, messenger RNA, as well as investing in creating manufacturing capacities and facilities so that one day we might be able to do them. And those sorts of long-term, 10-year investments in science and technology really actually were the foundation for how I saw us moving forward through this pandemic.
Thank you, Dr. Graham. What would you add to that?
Well, in addition to having the antigen design and the delivery system developed ahead of time, there were also relationships, scientific relationships ahead of time with similar goals. And so with Moderna, we started in 2017 with a pandemic preparedness and response plan covering the paramyxoviruses and coronaviruses. And so we were working ahead of time, which developed trust, which allowed rapid decisions at risk to be made for manufacturing.
Well, unfortunately, as we know, this will not be our last pandemic. So, what aspects of the new and the existing partnerships that came about to produce the COVID vaccines should be replicated or even augmented and maybe made a permanent fixture of our world in order to be ready for the next pandemic? Dr. Graham, let's start with you on that.
We've been thinking a lot about this, partly as a matter of survival, having responded to multiple pandemic threats over this last 10 years, starting with chikungunya and MERS, and then Ebola in West Africa and Zika. It just keeps going on and on. And so we've been trying to prospectively prepare for new pandemic threats by addressing each of the 26 families of viruses that can infect humans. And so the concept is developing prototype countermeasures for each of those viral families and being prepared with phase 1 trial data ahead of time. For instance, I think even though we went fast, I think we could have gone about 2 months faster if we had already done our mRNA trial with the MERS coronavirus construct. So being prepared allows you to have better response. And I think the work of preparedness is long-term, and it requires a long-term investment in basic research and knowledge-based development and manufacturing development so that we can make the rapid response. And so I think separating the need for preparedness from the need for response is very important.
And Dr. Hoge, speaking from the standpoint of the private sector, relying on those public investments, what would you say we can do best to be ready for the next pandemic?
I think you need to continue to invest, really from our perspective, at both ends of that problem. On the basic biomedical research side, continuing to advance candidate or prototype vaccines to answer some of the questions that you just don't know until you run the experiment, like what dose level and what kinds of immunogenicity you're going to see with a given platform technology. At the end of the day, we were incredibly fortunate as a company to be at a stage of our growth where we'd built the factory, but we weren't yet using it. And the challenge is for us as we mature as a company, that won't always be true. And so how does the public sector maintain the capacity to respond as quickly in the future, and not depend upon just getting fortunate. The right companies were present at the right time with some capacity to solve that problem. And so really that's where we're going to need investment from the public sector, both in basic science, basic biomedical research, and in ensuring we have the capacity to respond in the future. The private sector has to do its part, but is a part of those investments as well.
Well, again, I want to thank and congratulate you for those achievements. And thank you also for making these very important points about the importance of the partnership between the public investment in basic biomedical research, hinged at the hip with the capabilities of the private sector to bring to bear the enormous expertise and insight and skills, cures, therapies, and everything else that we have seen coming out of the basic biomedical research enterprise for decades and in spades in this pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.